Yo creo que estamos.
Hello. Sí, ¿te parece bien si comenzamos, Karen?
Sí, por mí está perfecto, Joaquín. Gracias.
Bueno, buenos días. Morning, everyone. Thank you for coming up. Okay, so we're here. It's 11:05. We'd like to get this session started then to present her thesis work, Karen Soacha-Godoy, supervised by Alexandre Lopez Borrul and Jaume Piera Fernandez. And I'm joined here with the committee, or supervisor committee, John Palmer from the Universidad de Montefaura, and Mayo Fuster Morel from the Bergman Klein Center for Internet and Society. So Karen, you will have about 45 minutes, give or take, or take, to an hour to present your work. After that, we'll start with the questions. They will be one at a time. So one of each of the panel members will ask questions, you'll answer them back, and move on to the next panel member and so forth. So whenever you're ready, the stage is yours.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for the members of the Tribunal of the Thesis of this Defense, to my director, my co-director, and all the people that is attending. I will, as Joaquin said, I will try to do this 1 hour as enjoyable as possible can be a thesis defense. So let me just start for just now. There you go. Okay. This defense will be divided in 7 steps. I will just navigate you through this. Starting from the introduction, we will start navigating why this research matters and what is the problem that I am addressing with this dissertation, which theoretical traditions is informing this thesis, and how this perspective are shaping the analytical approach, the methods, the research design, and how we address the methodological choices of this dissertation, the results that are compiled in 3 articles. This thesis is a compilation of research articles, 2 of them already published, and the 3rd one in a preprint available. The conclusions, the main findings, and how this thesis is responding to the initial research questions, the contribution, and finally, which research direction are opening as a result of this investigation. Before starting into the core of the thesis, I would like to pause briefly, because this thesis is possible thanks to a collective effort. As any research, but particularly participatory research, is thanks to the collective effort, relationship, and mutual care of the people behind them. Then I want to start for acknowledging to my director and my co-director, Jaume Piera and Alexander Lopez Borrol, for the guidance and the critical thinking and support during this journey of almost 6 years. To the communities, collaborators, and people behind the Cause for CLAD project, the Minca Citizen Observatory and the Planet Citizen Observatory, as well as my research group, EMBIMOS and the Instituto de Ciencias del Mar, CSIC, for providing a very generous and supportive research environment. The citizen science community, in particular the RECAP community and the Colombian participatory science community, who has provided discussions, questions, and are fundamental part of the works that I am presenting today. My friends, my climbing community, my circle of family and close friends that has been fundamental for me to understand what is reciprocity, mutual care, and understanding especially gratitude beyond participatory and academic settings. So with this initial introduction, I would like just to dive into the core of my dissertation. Why this research matter, or why is understanding digital infrastructure matter? Nowadays, there is a significant production of data coming from citizen science. What you see nowadays is an image from the Global Biodiversity Information Facility that is accounted for more than 3.6 billion of data of all biological records. More than 50% of the data are coming from citizen science platforms. Some of them quite well known, like eVert, ArtPortalen, iNaturalist, most of them based between US and Europe. And between them, just contributing more than the 50% than the 3.6 billion observations that you are seeing. Beyond that, behind these digital platforms that are contributing to this open data that is allowing a significant amount of research in biodiversity, there is people. People taking this observation on the field, people contributing to understand and monitoring biodiversity on global scales, scales that no scientific endeavor can do it by itself. This is showing not just in terms of biodiversity monitoring, but also how this citizen science is contributing to mapping the indicators for the Sustainable Development Goals and others endeavors at the global scale, like at the Urban Monitoring Framework. Despite the relevance that citizen science platform and this infrastructure is taking globally, the truth is there is a significant conceptual underdevelopment of these digital infrastructures. They have a central role in the production of the knowledge and also in the creation of the communities behind citizen science, but they are treated nowadays first as a neutral platform, as a short-term project, or as simple interfaces for data collection. There are three interrelated issues behind this reality, and is one, the conceptual fragmentation. There is an important overlapping of terms out there related to what is a citizen science platform, participatory platform, crowdsourcing platforms, and this overlapping in terms is quite challenging in terms of creating an understanding of what are them. Institutional fragility, as I mentioned before, they are treated as a short-term project, not as an infrastructure, and this creates challenges in terms of studying and treating as a research subject, and governance opacity. Nowadays, how this platform are creating agreements, defining rules of use, and a mechanism of transparency for accountability is not explicit in most of them. Then the question is, if citizen science increasingly rely in this digital infrastructure, our intention or the spirit behind this dissertation is how are they shaping knowledge governance, and how are they shaping the sharing and accountability of this knowledge, of the co-production of this knowledge. For addressing this research question, we propose three objectives. The first one is, what is the state of knowledge? What do we know about the citizen science platform and the citizen observatories? The second is, considering that citizen observatory is a term that has been gaining a lot of momentum, especially in terms of Europe, what do we understand for that? What is the development of this concept, and what is the future, maybe a projection of this in terms of the community beyond Europe? And the third one is examining governance dimensions. How these platforms are defining control, access, and responsibility. With these three objectives and the initial introduction of the thesis, I will move then to the conceptual framing of the dissertation. We have like three main schools of thoughts that were driving the research. The first one is infrastructure studies and knowledge infrastructures. The second one, knowledge governance and knowledge commons. And the final one, participatory science and citizen science studies in general. For the first one, Starr and Roeder was fundamental for understanding socio-technical system and understanding infrastructure as a relational and embedded arrangement. Hine and the definition of knowledge infrastructure and how they are long-term efforts that need to be understood, how they are shaping the construction of knowledge. In terms of knowledge governance and knowledge commons, the work by Eleanor Ostrom, Frischman, Madison, and Strandberg was fundamental to understand knowledge as a shared resources. Frischman used the initial construction of Ostrom in terms of governance of natural resources to apply in terms of knowledge. And finally, in terms of citizen science and participatory science studies, Peter Brenton and the previous classification of citizen science platform were fundamental for the taxonomy that we are proposing, as well as the work of Karen Cooper and the equitable data governance models. That is an essential part of the SEXTANT model for governance that is the final part of this dissertation, and the work by Mookie, Huclay, and co-authors, and the understanding of what is citizen science. And in this part, I want just to amplify about this initial debate. Citizen science as a research of study has been, as a subject of research, has been increasingly exploding in the last 20 years. There are a lot of research out there about what is citizen science, all the practices, and so on. But despite that effort, still the definition of citizen science is quite fluid. And we don't have a general agreement within the academic or practitioner field. Then Mookie, Huclay, and co-authors produced this chapter within a book saying what is citizen science and what are the challenges to really convey that definition. And at the end, they are approaching to in a framework to understand that, and a conclusion to say that we need to use citizen science in a more flexible way. Especially if we consider that still we have a lot of terminology out there. We talk about participatory science, citizen science, community science, civic science, participatory voluntary monitoring, and all these terms, in some way, we are trying to get an agreement of trying to find it in a one umbrella term. For this dissertation, we decided to use participatory science as an umbrella term for all of this, or participatory sciences, which some of the part of the world, especially US, are defining. And I will use throughout the presentation participatory science and citizen science indistinguishable, like at the same time, like as synonyms. Citizen science in the context of this thesis is defined as the voluntary participation of non-professional scientists in the research cycle at different stages and with different kind of tasks. And this is important to mention that people in citizen science, the active involvement can be from shaping research agenda to collecting data to designing itself the research. Starting from this point, I will move to the methods used for this dissertation. This thesis was developed through a qualitative dominant approach and a multi-method research design, essentially using three lenses. The first lens is what do we know about this infrastructure? The second lens is what are these platforms? And the third lens is what do they do politically? For responding the first lens, we used a systematic review used in the PRISMA method after defining a body of knowledge of 474 papers and 72 of them deeply analyzed, the other one using bibliometrics and quantitative synthesis. We understand what is the production of knowledge in this area. What are the trends? What is the focus of the study? Who is producing the data? Who is studying, or who is really concerned about digital infrastructure behind citizen science or participatory science? What are these platforms? For what are these platforms? My main focus of research was the Cost for Cloud project. Cost for Cloud is a EU funded project that initially was defined to co-create 13 services for 9 citizen science observatory, but these services was open and available for any citizen observatory to be used. I was part of the coordination team behind this project during 3.5 years, and using grounded theory and constructivist action research, I was participating in the co-design, in the workshop, in the testing of the services. This is part of the fundamental part of where I was understanding the dynamics of governance behind citizen observatories. The third part is an embedded case studies, and means how we understand more these arrangements and dynamics in the governance in these platforms. For that, I used 2 case studies, one that is Minka, a citizen observatory that I am part also, that is part of the EMBIMOS research group, and I have been in the group coordinating behind this platform for years, and Planet, that is a citizen observatory based in France, in which, apart from being of the Cost for Cloud project, I was in a research instance with them to understand better the agreements and the arrangements for governance that this platform define. MINCA, just to clarify, MINCA is a citizen science platform citizen observatory coordinated by EMBIMOS, oriented to support the monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals. Nowadays focus on biodiversity, but in expansion to environmental variables. And especially for the people that I hope so is online and is not very familiar with the term of citizen observatory, the expression of this platform is an app and a website. But behind this app and behind this website, there is a team of people, an interdisciplinary team, coordinating and mobilizing communities that make real the connection between data, territory, and impact. And Planet is a citizen observatory based on artificial intelligence that facilitates the identification of plants, coordinated by CIRAT. Between those two citizen observatories, they account for almost 26 million of data available, open data available about biodiversity, and more than almost 7.7 million users that are registered. In the case of MINCA, MINCA also hosts more than 300 projects, all kind of nature of, all kind of types, at different scales about biodiversity. Before closing the part of the methods under the research design, I think that is an important consideration to do, and is the ethical reflexivity behind my role as a researcher and as a participant of these projects. Because, in fact, I was part of the teams behind, or I am part of the teams behind this, and then for me all the time was necessary to take distance from the research that I was doing. Then for that I use systematic documentation, triangulation with literature, and critical distance to evaluate as MINCA, as the production of the Cost for Cloud project, as possible neutral as I can. Before moving to the results. As I mentioned initially, these results that I am presenting are already published in 3 articles. The first one is published in the Citizen Science Theory and Practice article, and is called Research Infrastructure in Citizen Science, a State of Knowledge and Taxonomic Framework as a Pathway to Sustainability. As I mentioned, a collective effort with great co-authors. The second article is The Backbone of Participatory Science, Reframing Citizen Observatory as Research Infrastructure, published in Sustainability. And the third one is a preprint in still development, improvement, and hope so in the future publication. That is When Platform Tech Size, Navigating Data Governance in Citizen Science Platform with the SEXTANT Model. Related to the first one, and the first question of the research is, what do we know about citizen science platform and citizen observatories? The first thing that we know is who is producing research about that. That is mainly concentrated in United States, Canada, and Europe, with 45% accounting for United States and 38% accounting for Europe, concentrated mainly in this area, and with a significant gap that maybe you cannot see very well because it's a matter of the light, but there is a significant gap in the Global South, especially in Africa and related in terms of research production, trends that are not surprising, considering that I was using mainstream databases, Web of Science and Scopus, but also even if I try to use great literature and other kind of repositories, the amount of research coming from these areas is very limited until now. Apart from understanding from where it's coming from, we were trying to understand what are the focus of the research, what are the topics that this research were addressing. For that, I use an analysis in BOSBigware, and using keywords, we identify chronologically 3 waves. The first wave of research is between 2016 and 2018, that is mainly focused on technological, describing the platforms, technical description of architecture of the platform, and model of engagement. This is the first part of the research that mainly the researchers was focused on. The second wave is monitoring system between 2019 and 2020. Then the discussion about citizen science platform were moving more to biodiversity, environmental monitoring, iNaturalist was also coming there. Then the discussion were more how the citizen science platform were supporting biodiversity monitoring and other kind of environmental monitoring. And the third wave, it was openness and frontier, more recently between 2021 and 2022, oriented to cutting-edge technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, open science, started to coming up more in this research. Apart from that, what I mentioned initially is we found the initial challenges we use the term citizen science platform and citizen observatory, but in fact, through this research, there are all kind of terms to call these platforms. Crowdsourcing platforms, community platform, biodiversity participatory platforms. We found 98 different kind of terms to call them. Initially, this that you see, that is a dynamic, like a graphic that can be navigate with different kind of categories. It's showing like 4 levels that we were identifying in this name. People was naming this platform using or a thematic focus, biodiversity, air quality, and so on, using an attribute related to the technical part, is a platform, infrastructure, and so on, an application, citizen science, community science, and an attribution is open, collaborative. They were using also like some of the names are very complex, other names are very like a citizen science platform, other are open, biodiversity, collaborative platform. It depends the names, how complex we're going on. Considering this diversity of platform, what we're proposing is a taxonomy to classify them, to aggregate this platform and create like a shared common language to understand. We propose 9 categories of platform, from on-site data entry, project discovery, knowledge hubs, enhanced learning, insight, decision support, and data analysis and visualization, and a final category that generalized crowdsourcing platforms. All the other 8 platforms are dedicated to citizen science, was built initially in their purpose to provide services for the citizen science community. This one is the use of platforms like OpenStreetMaps, even Twitch and WhatsApp for participatory science purposes. That's why we keep it in that way. Within this taxonomy, we are focusing in this one, citizen observatories. Initially, I mentioned eBird, ARPortalin, Minka, Platnet. All of them are part of this category according to our classification, a citizen observatory supporting the on-site data entry and on-site data collection. This was our initial part of understanding the landscape of research in citizen science platforms. The second part was diving into the concept of citizen observatory. A citizen observatory is having a particular momentum in Europe, and not very recent. Since 2012, when Jacqueline McGlade mentioned the importance of citizen observatory for the role of a complementary system in the Earth observation systems and how this can be fundamental to understand the challenges at global scale, citizen observatory are starting to develop in different kind of research. Later, more related to the methodological framework, how they provide governance support and how to create communities in the territory to provide data as a tool for environmental monitoring and environmental governance, as an information system, also as a research infrastructure, later more connected to the socio-technical system, and one definition that is quite wide acceptable without the citizen science community because it was created within the We Observe project, a European project that was coming together, a lot of the people working in citizen observatories, is considering citizen observatories an advanced participatory science initiative. And this is important in this context, because now we identify at least 7 approaches to define citizen observatories. And if you see in the article, we identify at least 18 different definitions. And this is not all those definitions that you find for a citizen observatory in these papers. There are way more, but we curate these 18, and with this we identify these 7 approaches, because the reflection about what is citizen observatory has been taken for other researchers before. Margaret Gold and other people have been saying, is a citizen observatory something independent of citizen science? Is a subset of that? Or maybe citizen observatory is really the umbrella term? That has been the discussion related to that. They have been coming more to the conclusion that citizen observatory is an evolution of citizen science, experience that is very, very connected to advocacy and decision, and for decision makers in terms of, then they consider that it's not just citizen science supporting basic research, but it's really creating impact in the territory. From our perspective, and using Mukiha-Clay framework, as I mentioned before, we think that citizen observatory is definitely connected with the same dynamical pattern that citizen science is having, and need to be understood from a fluid and flexible way. That's why we understand that citizen observatory have mainly, or can be seen to 3 lenses, from the descriptive, instrumental, and normative lens. From the descriptive lens, works as a socio-technical system. From the perspective of instrumental, in terms of shaping by goals and objectives, work as a research infrastructure. And finally, from the expectations that a citizen observatory can have, or the values, work as an advanced participatory science initiative, as I mentioned before. For our work, it was important to reframe, understand, and like a dive in the analysis of citizen observatory as research infrastructures. For that, we propose a series of functions in terms of social and technical functions from the socio-technical perspective, how a citizen observatory nowadays is providing sustain online communities, is providing training, is moderating interaction, is sustaining these communities, and from the technical perspective is providing instrument and technical infrastructure for the data-driven protocols of data quality, supporting open science, interoperability, and mobilization of the data. Some characteristics that I will just pass a little bit faster on that, and is citizen observatories need to co-evolve with the users, because as respond to a dynamic socio-technical system, the citizen observatory need to do it itself. Also, it's a dynamic learning environment, need to have multi-direction informational flows, and the information and communication technologies, the ICTs, need to really support interoperability, accessibility, and openness. For us, it was important also in the analysis to identify kind of 2 types of big citizen observatories. One is tailored and one is open. Tailored is the citizen observatories that are created mainly to respond to one project, usually in a short-term point with an important challenge, that is that sometimes operate as a silos, creating just data for this project, and what happens is when the project ends, sometimes the data is disconnected and the community behind the citizen observatory is also lost. But they are important, necessary, and I don't think so that they need to convert in an open citizen observatory. Both of approaches are important for the citizen science community, and the open citizen observatories and platforms managed usually from an institutional or long-term perspective that are hosting projects for many others. Like for instance, that are Minca's hosting project of 300 or more and growing initiative. That's why they design the platform very different as a tailor, because they need to think in functionalities that can support a diverse group of citizen science initiatives. With the understanding of the research landscape, the understanding of the citizen observatories, we started to move to the core of the question of the thesis, it was the governance models. How this platform and governing knowledge, how they are shaping the knowledge production. And basing the grounded theory and the approach that we have in the case studies of Minka and Planet, we propose a model for navigating that. We name it SEXTANT model, SEXTANT inspiring the navigational instrument for the people to use in the sea. Then in this case, the SEXTANT model is helping researchers, practitioners, decision makers to navigate the governance positions of a digital infrastructure in the co-production of knowledge in participatory science. Using input from the Knowledge Commons framework, we propose 3 action arenas, that is ownership, sharing, and accountability. And we propose 3 roles: enabler, gatekeeper, and mediator. Ownership is related to the rights and obligation over the data, sharing the technical and policy conditions that govern the data circulation, and finally accountability. That is the mechanisms that platforms create to ensure transparency, consent, and reciprocity. Platforms in that case can take different roles. Enablers are the platforms that are lowering the technical and policy barriers to facilitate the contributor control, and we can say in some way the user expectations. Mediator negotiate between competing priorities within the platform. A lot of this connected with privacy settings and transparency. And gatekeeper that centralize authority over the data flows and decisions. Thank you. For creating the model, but later for testing how the model works, we were going back to our 2 mature citizen observatories, both supporting biodiversity collection, both committed to open science, both integrated into broader research infrastructure like the Global Information Facility GBIF. But they configure, what we found is both those configure ownership, share, and accountability differently. For that, when we use the SEXTANT model, we identify that Minka can have different approaches for ownership, sharing, and accountability. In the case, for instance, of ownership, Minka is acting as a gatekeeper. It's adopting a model where the observations can be shared in the platform. The users can use different kind of Creative Commons licenses. But at the end, when an observation reaches the research grade, the observation starts to be part of a permanent commons to ensure long-term scientific integrity and reproducibility of the research produced with this data. Then in this case, when the user wants to remove the account, they can do it, but the data remain anonymized and under Creative Commons by attribution license. In this case, Minka is adopting a role of gatekeeper in terms of ownership. In terms of sharing, is adopting the role of enabler, mobilizing data using Creative Commons licenses, publishing data through GBIFs, aligning with the FAIR principles, and supporting SDG monitoring. In terms of accountability, is an emerging mediator, is working in transparent data policies with data sharing agreements, community validation processes of the data, and defining clear data persistence and rules. But there is no automated downstream of user alerts. People don't know how their data is used nowadays. Planet, from their side, they decide to take a strong position related to the register of users. In the case of Planet, people don't need to register for using the services. This is having in mind privacy by design. They are minimizing the personal data collection. And there is a limited, but in this case, there is a limited granular ownership control once the data is sharing. They are using a 1 license by default that is Creative Commons by attribution share alike. And in terms of sharing, is acting as a partially mediator and accountability a partial enabler. As we see, Minka and Planet, despite sharing a lot of attributes in terms of what kind of citizen observatories are. They are navigating governance in different ways. What we learned from that is platforms do not have fixed governance identity. They shift roles depending on the arena. The infrastructure design include governance choices. When we are defining functionalities, terms of policies, terms of use, we are encoding governance choices. Open science does not mean uniform governance, and I think that this is part of the important call behind this. Open doesn't mean losing the perspective of privacy and contextual openness, especially in participatory science when we need to provide and understand the challenges behind the people sharing this data. Platforms actively shape power distribution. Who validates which knowledge is valid or not is part of what platforms are doing nowadays. And digital infrastructure are governance actors, are not neutral pipelines, as I mentioned, or just technical tools. With that part of the results, now we are moving to the final part of the dissertation, the conclusions and contributions. Then what are the main findings of this thesis? I think it's important to point that related to the academic and the theoretical foundation. Then, as I mentioned from the infrastructure studies, it was initially framed as a relational and learning in practice. From the research in this thesis, we learned that participatory platforms are operationalized through the design and the shifting roles that platforms can adopt across the action arenas that we are proposing. From the perspective of knowledge infrastructure and thinking in the citizen science platform and long-term assemblage, Hine proposed that those long-term assemblage are mainly defined by standards. We understand also that this long-term assemblage, this long-term perspective and the infrastructure are defined by the settings by default and the workflows that the participatory science platforms are defining. From knowledge commons, we see that these shared resources, that is knowledge, in the case of the citizen observatories, the commons are defined as a rule setting or rule enforcing when we are defining terms of use and other kind of policies. From the perspective of the equitable data governance and the invitation or necessity that Cooper are proposing related to define voice, control, benefit, and especially accountability from the data that is sharing participatory science, we see that the data can produce or block through concrete infrastructural mechanisms this, and that even an open citizen observatory or openness can still reproduce an equal power when accountability is weak or not completely transparent or explicit. As a conclusion, our initial research question was what kind of infrastructure and citizen science platform becoming and how they shape knowledge governance. Then our response to that is they are becoming research infrastructure. They are configuring knowledge governance through action arena and specific design arrangements. Platforms shape governance, distributing control, ownership, accountability, or limiting even this accountability depending on the settings that they are defining and the workflows that they are creating. Governance outcomes depends of the roles or the roles defined in the across in the chief story in the across arena, not as a single platform label. When we see an open citizen science platform, we cannot assume how they are defining the arrangement for governance. And open science does not imply one uniform governance configuration. In terms of the objective, we map the field of citizen science platforms and citizen observatories, clarifying literature, understanding digital platforms, and reframing these as a citizen observatories, and we diagnose the configuration, understanding how this governance is operationalized in these platforms. One conclusion or one big message from that is better participatory science required governance choices to be visible, justifiable, and revisable within the infrastructure design. What are the main contributions of this thesis? The shared analytical language, the purpose-based taxonomy initially proposed are the intention is improve comparability, design clarity, and policy alignment when understanding citizen science platform and citizen observatories, a conceptual reframing of the citizen observatories and research infrastructure. These very connected with the necessity to see them as a long-term effort. The third part is the governance lens, how we can understand citizen science platform as a governance actor that shape authority, responsibility, and knowledge production. And finally, a practical tool. SEXTANT is still under development, is still with a lot of margin for improvement and testing, but it's a practical tool that helps to diagnose ownership, sharing, and accountability across platforms. Which research direction, and with that we are approaching to the final part of this presentation, with research direction emerged from this work. We definitely think that it's necessary to create comparative studies across region. As I mentioned, all this research is shaped a lot by the European and US perspective, from the way of thinking, but also from the context of funding. Then need to be seen from others, cultural and technological context. The second one is the necessity to understand sustainability models in citizens observatory, especially we start to think on them as research infrastructures. Evaluating the SEXTANT model in the context of policy evaluation and platform design beyond environmental and biodiversity settings, that this was mainly also the focus of this dissertation. Public health, climate change, and other kind of citizens, and other kind of areas are important to really validate this instrument. And one emerging and important point is the role that artificial intelligence integration in citizen observatory will play in terms of the construction of what knowledge is validated, what knowledge is sharing within this platform, and especially because a lot of citizen observatories are considering the use of this AI integration. With this, the part of the future research, this research also, apart from the 4 articles that I was as an author, there are other publications as a co-author related to citizen science, open science, and multiple talks and posters that we share with the community, academic community and participatory community for evolving this work that is shared here. And with this, thank you for your attention, and I welcome your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for your presentation. You kept it in time, and too. We'll start with the questions, if that's okay with you. I think the first one to go is John Palmer.
Okay.
Being the
Perfect.
secretary. Next, Mayo, and I'll be last, if that's okay.
Great.
Thank you for this very interesting presentation and really fascinating dissertation. I think you've managed to do work that for years I've been worried we're not adequately focused on, and that I've been wondering about in my own involvement in citizen science. And so honestly, what you've produced is really, really valuable. It was a pleasure to read and really, really informative to watch your presentation. I'll start with some methodological questions, although I think some of them may veer into beyond that. I'm curious, first of all, about your grounded theory approach and participant observation, and whether, I guess to begin with, how you approached thinking within, from inside these organizations. How do you approach thinking about what are the important categories that you're going to look at, or what are the important issues, and how do you avoid getting too focused on what the organization already understands as important, if you see what I'm saying, right? So there's kind of a risk when you do this, which is the risk that I find myself, like from within a citizen science organization. I'm constantly trapped in our own language and our own categories that we've created, and I worry that I'm not getting beyond that. So I'm curious to know a little bit how that process worked. And if it's okay, if it's all right with you, we're going to do kind of questions back and forth rather than a whole bunch. Yeah.
Oh, that will be great,
Okay.
because otherwise I need
Same
to
here.
accumulate too much at the same time. Thank you so much, John, for the comments. And I think that this is part of, and that's why I stop at the beginning with the gratitude and reciprocity, because the call for taking distance and seeing and not immerse myself just in one citizen observatory or one set of citizen observatory from the grounded theory and maybe get enclosed in certain kind of category. It was because all the time I was back and forth to the citizen science community. All the time we were participating in conference, discussing with the citizen science community and validating the approach that I was taking from the grounded theory. It was a constant iteration of myself thinking, okay, it was this, really the governance approaches that I am taking is like valid. I am not, as you said, only focusing in one part, and also because at the same time I was participating on the creation of the Minca Citizen Observatory. Then it was a whole process. Then the grounded theory from one side is giving me the possibility of seeing the emerging categories all the time, keeping this an iteration that is not just my work. It's the work of many other researchers that was navigating with me in this academic setting and in this conference.
Excellent, thanks. Having gone through this whole process, I'm curious, and I guess you started touching on points of like kind of what's next, but what do you feel is left out of the picture that you gained from this? Which parts of how citizen science observatories operate are missing, and how would you go about, methodologically, how would you go about getting insights into them?
Can I go back to here? No, this. This is a very important question, John, and I think that especially people like us that is working daily in Citizen Observatory and seeing the important role that they are having in shaping, in responding to emerging and global problems. And I think that apart from this, that is very specific in terms of what I consider or what we consider that the future research should move. I think the connection with impact in the territory and really studying what is the connection between decision-making, impact, advocacy, and citizen observatory should have. I think there is an important call nowadays from the citizen science communities asking that these infrastructures and the communities and with them are showing how they are transitioning to real impact, how the people are seeing the benefits of that effort. I think that here maybe is not very explicit in terms of what a future research should be done.
Thanks. Do you think, is there a risk within the type of citizen science that most of us here are doing, that because it's, you know, one of the challenges you mentioned, also the kind of like long-term sustainability question and economic sustainability, tends to lead us all towards focusing a lot on funding. Is there a risk that that focus on funding leads us away from priorities that would emerge if we would be more kind of organically focused or created organically from the communities of the people who are actually participating rather than from the science, kind of professional science community?
The answer is yes, okay. In my understanding, John, and I think that that's why maybe the SEXTANT model is trying just to not hide that. It means it's to be explicit that any kind of platform, in many ways, their designs in terms of privacy, sharing data, priorities of which data is shared or not, is a lot of defined from the model of sustainability that they have. And it's difficult to try to be neutral on that way. I think that the point nowadays is, or part of this dissertation and the work that we are doing with the team, or the invitation is to be explicit within the platform, within the policies, for the participants when they decide to choose a platform, that there is this conditioning behind, because we all, and especially platforms that don't have a structural funding, no? We are not sustained by governments and so on. We are responding a lot of the specific needs of research projects. Then it's a bias that I think most of us will have.
Could you imagine taking or aspects of the approach you took here and applying them to viewing citizen science from the perspective of the participants? Can you think about how you might design future research that would involve the participants' view of citizen science, which might not even start off with a big focus on infrastructure, right? Perhaps if we go into communities and see how people are engaged in science who are not professional scientists, perhaps they start off with other aspects of their daily lives or other practices.
Yes, I really would like to explore. I have to say that, John, there is many other areas of research in citizen science. But for now, I think that one of my priorities is, I think that even particularly non-scientists have a lot to say behind governance, because all of this research is mainly only for them. At the end, they have a lot to say in understanding these platforms that are their platforms. They are their users. They are custodians and managers of their data. When I said that data, mostly non-professional scientists. And I think that one line of research is involving really those participants in understanding all of this, in validating, in testing, and even in rethinking these models from another lens that I really would like. I would like to love on that in a postdoc.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan. No, I think it's not.
See?
Creo que sí.
Now it's working?
I think so.
Now it's working?
Sí.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
So, first, congratulations for the thesis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this effort and your contribution to science and critique. Also, congratulations from the presentation. Has been very clear. I have 5 comments I would like to do, and some of them have questions. My first comment is in the line of congratulating you, like highlighting the timeline and how timely this research is and how relevant it is in a context of crisis in science and a lot of attacks to science. No, you have put your attention in something that's actually bringing hope in terms of more participatory, more democratic type of science. So this, I think, is very relevant in the current context. I also think it's very relevant the question of putting the attention not only in citizen science, but particularly on infrastructure in a moment in which there is all the debate about possible public infrastructure for science. No? And in this, I think it's really, really politically very relevant, your work. No questions here. My second comment is on the congratulation you, because the thesis had ended up with 2 publications and one that it will end up into a publication. No, this is not always the case. No, and the thesis is cohesive, but at the same time has articles in it, no, which is something that not always is achieved, no, because you have a very fragmented pieces, but you have been able to create a framework to put the 3 contributions together, and they go quite smooth together. But this has perhaps limit the updating of the data in the presentation, in the sense of you have not present data from 2024, 2025, or 2026. No, you have presented publications in the moment they were done. No, but even if you have, because of the article structure of the thesis, you have presented the data as it was. No, you have been able to cover it when you have reflect in your presentation, but also in the thesis, about the future lines of work. No, and in this line, I think it was a good way of covering it. But Also regarding this element of the 3 publications as part of the thesis, there is something I would like to ask you that is very, very minor, but still, the thesis is about data, about knowledge, that I don't understand, which is the copyright and licensing of the thesis. Because yes, it's in the thesis you have a part, in the
Yeah.
Here, this I don't understand, because you refer to overall the thesis is copyright, but then there are parts that are Creative Commons, So I would like you to clarify this.
Wow. And of course, you are completely right. In fact, the thesis, most of the content is Creative Commons, and the 2 articles are publicly open, and it was part of our philosophy. Then I think that should be written as a general sharing policy. I think that there's oversight from my side, because in general all the thesis is mostly shared by Creative Commons licenses. There is no content that really is not available or not able to share. I completely agree with your not minor comment.
Okay. But again, congratulations in the way you have been able to sort certain elements that have to do with being a thesis by publication. Third comment, regarding the methodology. I really have enjoyed the combination of methodologies that you have incorporated into the thesis. I have some elements that I would like to put in value that are there, but you don't claim them, which I think are very valuable. I think the thesis, in its methodologies, apply care ethics, and it's something that you don't reclaim it in itself as part of the methodology, but it's a quality that it's there, about the reciprocity and the recognition of contributions, authorship. It also have another quality about the ethics, the ethical concerns that you have been also making present in the presentation. These are elements that normally are given by granted or not very put in the attention, but I think you can claim them. Also, the communicative capacity, and particularly the visual communicative capacity that you have showed during the presentation. I think it's an important quality in this moment for research, to have this capacity to communicate it in this way. It has been very beautiful presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. But I have a comment beyond congratulate you about the methodology and claiming this. I have a comment on the methodology for the systematic literature review, because you overall refer to your methodology as qualitative, but this part is quantitative, And my question is, could you elaborate a bit more? How was the selection process for the papers, the 474 papers? How did you, which were the criteria for selecting them?
Yes, of course. This essentially was following the framework of Prisma. The first debate, it was which databases we will use. And then when we having the debate about, we knew that when we were choosing Web of Science and Scopus, because what we said is, which terms are we gonna search for? We used 2 terms, observatory and platform, and then define them in all citizen science. And then we searched in these initial 2 platforms, Scopus, Web of Science, but also later in the debate, we said how we can expand a little bit, these mainstream databases. Then we search in Google Scholar, Zenodo for data-grade literature. With that, we reached the 474 papers. Well, no, it's not true. We reached 1,300 papers or so on, less duplicates, Let's on, then we reached the 474, using also reading the abstract, the keywords, and the title we identify with a set of criteria of including and excluding that is what really related to citizen science, because if you search for observatory or participatory platform, there is all kind, and then we were finding in what is related to citizen science. And second, also, what is related to citizen science, but focusing on platforms itself. This was using all the abstract and classifying them. And with that, we classify in 4 kind of articles. One that were more descriptive, that were talking about the technical future of the platform, were more analyzing, and it was people that were working like us in understanding the platforms. Were more in experiences. There are many articles talking about what do they do with the platform, what do they learn. A lot of this coming from iNaturalist and so on, that there are a lot of people saying, we use the platform and we learn and we produce. And one that we call like link data, that it was analyzing, for instance, artificial intelligence in the context of these platforms. Then that's why, and I can go much like that's why part of the process that, and related to the comment of quantitative and qualitative. Yes, we create the body of knowledge that we call that 474 with the category of analysis. It means papers that we really focus on, and what we want to know is understanding this platform, that it was the 72. We almost a qualitative research, that it was coding all of that and understanding the 72. For the other, we use bibliometric analysis, that it was in fact more quantitative.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It gets clear. On my 4th comment, which here, my 4th and my 5th comments are the more substantial ones. And it has to do with the commons theory, because you apply commons theory and you dialogue with it, which is, I came from commons theory, so I have enjoyed it a lot, this part of the thesis. But something that for me was surprising is that you work on commons theory, but from the Ostrom school. And Jack with Ostrom, but also with his followers, that bring his framework into the digital and this. But you seems not to inject with the cyberscholar approach to commons, like the digital commons. That is particularly where I have been working more, And so from this perspective, from the cyberscholar digital commons perspective, not the Ostrom school perspective, I think it would have been interesting to approach, because, for example, when I was looking into your taxonomy, which is a very relevant contribution, when I was looking into the taxonomy, and it's very relevant because you provide a clarification in a context in which there is so much different concepts, but these different concepts is not only that needs to be like quantified 98 and then propose a taxonomy, but also to understand where they came from. And because when I was looking into the typography, to the taxonomy, and I was thinking about the definition that you have provided about participative science for the thesis, and also like the citizen science definition of the European Commission that you have pointed in the presentation, I was thinking from the lens of cyberscholar, from the lens of the theory of commons from the cyberscholar. I was looking and I was like, okay, but Wikipedia is citizen science, no? Because Wikipedia can go into the definition that you were pointing, even if we can say that there is the implicit message that citizen science also always has to do with institutions that are universities, research centers, and not forms like digital commons like Wikipedia. And I'm referring to this comment because it's not that I am questioning you, Wikipedia is citizen science or not. I am referring that from the lens of cyber scholars, perhaps you would understand that you would reflect the taxonomy differently, no?
Yeah.
Also, regarding the taxonomy, no? Perhaps you would increase the typologies that have to do with co-creation. Because, again, the question of Wikipedia is about co-creation. It's not only collecting data, it's not only, no, it's more than that. No? This kind of common-based peer productions are not only solving one part of the research project or research process, it's a whole process of knowledge creation. No? And that was a comment and a suggestion to dialogue more with civil scholars. That if you want to say something, but there is no question here. And here is my last comment, which is very related to this. What I find striking is that you don't dialogue with civil scholars, but actually your approach is very much characteristic of those of the civil scholars. Because you approach infrastructure as something as something in itself. You have done a very good work in the context of the debate and the state of the art of citizen science, putting the attention on the importance of the infrastructure. This is a very relevant contribution that you have done. And but your view about the role of infrastructure in the whole governance process to me could go in the future work, could go a step forward, because you analyze infrastructure as a part, and you reclaim the point that infrastructure is very relevant for the governance. And so why don't you reflect to the governance of citizen science, in which infrastructure is one part of the governance? You know, why don't you integrate the infrastructure as part of the governance? Which is something that it would put the importance of your point about how relevant infrastructure is. It's so relevant infrastructure that is part of the governance. It does not only influence of the governance, no? And this could be like a follow-up, no? Or a evolution about how of your main contribution, how important is infrastructure, that we have to consider it as definitive of the citizen science governance, of the citizen science definition in itself, no? Particularly on the ones that want to go into, well, the two typologies, the citizen science and the observatories, no? And I find it very useful, your the 16 model, but still I would incorporate into the how this relates to the overall governance, no? And these were my comments.
Thank you so much, Mayo. And just what I can say as a general comment, and I appreciate a lot your view, because I have read your work about democratic challenges on participatory platforms. And I have to say that in this case, it was definitely a path that I would like to. I think that, yes, the taxonomy requires a future update, an evolution, and a conversation with other kind of frameworks that make this more rich in terms of what is right now. I think that definitely I see this path, because this initial work was trying, for me, it was at the beginning challenges, trying to combine the already theoretical frameworks and trying to see infrastructure from this perspective, participatory science. And I know that there is an important, like, a room for improvement of gap in more approaches like the digital commons and even digital public goods. And there is a lot of connection that can really enrich this vision. And I really would like another postdoc to do.
Yes, that would be a very good idea.
Because yes, I think this taxonomy requires a second version from that. And just to say, because thank you for not asking me if Wikimedia is or not citizen science. This was a discussion that we were having last year in the Ibero-American Open Science Conference, because it was particularly relevant that the people behind the branch of participatory science with all the community of Wikimedia. All the community was the one taking over, saying, okay, we see participatory science as us, as ours. And my only comment then is I don't know why, I don't understand why there is still like a division of communities between the Wikimedistan and all this great co-production and knowledge and the citizen science community. I don't know where is this. Maybe infrastructures and the recognition of Wikimedia and their role in contributing that can help us to not just connect theoretical frameworks, but connect us in practice, because I see this gap. Thank you.
Thank you to you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, for your answers. Wonderful questions from both doctors. I also like to congratulate you on your work, on your presentation. Like Maya said, it was very aesthetically pleasing. I followed your work for many years. You always have a very good way of showing us how you've done your work. So it's that takes a lot of work as well. It's good to recognize it. Also, congratulations to both supervisors, which you can see their little grain of sand in all your work. Like Mayo said, I think it's a work that it's very important, it's very relevant, it's novel, and it's very timely. Citizen observatories and platforms, they're not exactly new, but they are very new. So I think it's a perfect time to do this kind of work. So I think it's very, very timely. I don't know how many questions I have. I have a lot, but I'll start with the beginning. First thing, about this terminology and what Maya was speaking about, the taxonomy-based classification that you propose. You have over 98 terms, I think you showed, for citizen observatories. How have you found, or can you perhaps explain us better how these range or this variation of terms actually have effects on funding, on sustainability, and how would, and a follow-up, how would that taxonomy-based, classification that you're proposing improve on that? Because I like the idea of creating a functional-based taxonomy, but I wonder what happens with observatories or with platforms that actually change their mission statements. This functional taxonomy based on a mission of what they want to do can shift over time. I think in your manuscript you actually referenced Gillespie and Van Dyke, and they talk about a mission drift. So you have these platforms that drift their mission throughout their course of history, perhaps because they evolve, they co-evolve with users, which is something you actually suggested should be done. So how would this taxonomy be influenced, and how will that taxonomy be affected in reality, in, for instance, funding?
Thank you, Joaquin, for the question. I think that with the taxonomy, we were a little bit ambitious in terms, and I have to say that this, a little bit is pure intention. And this is a lot of place in the reality of Europe that I cannot deny, that I am placed here and my research is very influenced by what is going on in Europe with citizen observatories. That is very different with the realities in other parts of the world, especially in South America, what is the other area that I know a little bit coming from there, coming from Colombia. And it is what we see right now is in Europe, different from the rest part of the world, there is a specific funding for citizen science, for infrastructures in citizen science, for participatory science initiatives. There is an important branch on funding. And there is an emerging explosion of platforms. And not just recently, the last 20 years. We are working now, there's an inventory of how many citizen science platforms are there in Europe, and still under work, but we can find more than 1,000 between mobile apps, platforms, and so on. How in practice we hope that this taxonomy can help is creating clusters of collaboration. At least between them recognizing, because for instance, nowadays when our first effort in Cost for Cloud with these 9 citizen observatories, they don't recognize this even as a citizen science platform at that time. Many of them, when the research project was written, said, we are citizen science platforms, we are citizen observatory, we are supporting citizen science and all these communities. Because even, for instance, Planet, that is one of the oldest one in Europe, with more than 20 years, was initially created for identification of plants with AI, helping people that like plants to see if this is a flower or what is this. And nowadays they are becoming the host of significant effort. And then when they themselves, the first step is they recognizing them and saying this label of citizen observatory is useful to identify other platforms like me that have similar challenges and say, we can create services that are like a transversal for all of us. This is for our work. Whatever is logging services, hosting services, data tracking services, because we recognize us as a same platform with similar challenges. But also the other is scaling up this narrative to the funders. When they are funding different kind of platform, they are expecting different kind of results. It's not the same to fund a citizen observatory to fund a knowledge hub. That, for instance, the European Citizen Science Platform, that is more focused on hosting resources, on training, and so on. Then also that we are trying to say is that funders and policymakers and so on, when they say technologies for citizen science, at least they have a general understanding that each platform is not the same community that is in EU citizen science platform and the kind of challenges that they have in terms of hosting data and resources and the cost, because it's not the same budget that we have as a citizen observatory hosting millions of photographs, millions of data, and the reliable data. That's what I said, it's pretty ambitious to try to pretend that a taxonomy will solve this problem, but it's a grain of sand for trying to contribute to this understanding of these platforms.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm thinking, okay, I love it. You used, I think it was chapter 3, you used a participatory observatory instead of a citizen observatory. And I was thinking, okay, I love that term, but what if I start using it and then I ask for funding and they say, no, we only fund citizen observatories. And I'm like, okay, I'll have to, so
yeah, you're right.
it's a future step. There's a lot of work to be done in that area, but I'm glad someone started it. I also love, again, these are comments, they are not questions, but how you talk about platforms as non-neutral agents, right? And this is very important framework of mind to work with these things, to recognize that no technology is neutral, and to recognize them as socio-technical agents, and to call for actually, making it a very explicit, instead of trying to make the perfectly neutral platform, to actually recognize that they're never going to be neutral. So we might as well be explicit on why they're not. And I loved the approach of the work you've done by also building on throughout the thesis from a systematic literature review to a larger model, and the cherry on top, which is the SEXTANT model. So I like that cumulative knowledge that you've been building. I love that. About the SEXTANT model, you used Minka as one of the examples. You mentioned that it was, in some ways, the gatekeeper when it concerned data. And I think there was a little side notes there that said if a user in Minka wants to delete their account, they can do it, but the data remains there anonymized. How do you manage that being against the right of the user to actually delete the data? I don't know how to say this in English. We call it derecho al olvido.
The right to be forgotten.
All right. I didn't know the translation. So how do you manage those two? How can you tell that Minka is actually being a gatekeeper for the sake of open science, so that data remains, and not for the sake of, consolidating power?
Oh, yeah. was the conversation with the lawyers. in fact, yeah, because it's a conversation mediated by law. Because you're right, the right to be forgotten is one of the part of the GDPR. And we were discussing this for a long while. It was not a decision that was not one day Minka wake up and said, when I say Minka, it's the team saying, okay, now we want to think in the commons. And it was this like a questioning of recognizing the work that also the community validating the data. There's the necessity to ensure that this data that is a research grade and that will be in global repositories can be, there's reproducibility of this data, of the research based on this data. Then the balance was, yes, we want to be transparent with our users, the users when they sign up the terms of use and the data sharing agreement and so on. And part of our, or in particular, my work or my interest is that in the future, these terms can be even more explicit to the users, not a long document that usually most of who reads terms of use? No one. Privacy policy, oh my God, no. But in the future, this can be even more explicit, visual, and clear for the people to be transparent about this decision. If you are joining Minka, you recognize that your data is always yours, but if this goes to a process of validation, this needs to recognize that it go into a commons area. And a commons area is not that you lost your right to be forgotten, because at the end, the data is anonymized, and we ensure that this data can be anonymized. Your comments and everything cannot be tracked to the user again. I mean, your data that remains be yours because you can download it and keep it as yours will be in the repository as anonymized and under certain kind of licenses that ensure that will be used. But according to the lawyers, we are not we are not violating the right to be forgotten from the participant, but yes, we are acting. And this is need to be transparent. We are that as a gatekeeper. We are in the sake of preservation of this common knowledge. We are saying no, you cannot erase completely your data. It's yours, but now goes to an additional value that need to be recognized by the rest of the community. I see my double thinking about that.
No, because I was struck by the question about it's true. I mean, the question that this element of keeping the data might be a source of power and increase, no?
Mm-hmm.
But power also can be in positive terms, not only power in over, but power for, no?
Mm-hmm.
And so if the governance, the governance of the data is based on a commons principles, it would be a way of keeping the data in a way that contribute to knowledge as a commons and not as a source of power exploitation, no, and privatization and commodification.
Yeah,
I agree. Like, it has to be very explicit. I love that. You cannot fight against it, but it has to be explicit.
Yes.
Thank you for your answer, though. That's an interesting topic to discuss for a Sunday night.
I'm not sure if I am in.
Well, you don't have anything to do now. You're done. You would. Just a quick one, one or two, and I'll let you go. The role of AI you mentioned at the end, the forbidden words. The role of AI, and this is my impression as a user for AI models, particularly for PlantNet. I've worked with PlantNet, recognizing plants in the field, and they're great and everything. But it also has this bias that you showed in the beginning. You showed in the beginning a very large map where you showed that most data comes from the US and Europe, which is true. But for the Global South, which you and I are from, these models tend to bias a lot your answers, right? So how do we turn, or how do we manage using these AI tools in such a way that they don't, I'm not sure how to say it, but to compensate for this bias. I'm not for users to get answers that are supposed to be for Europe, or to motivate them to get more data for less common places in biodiversity. I'm not sure if the question is correct.
Yeah, I think so, Joaquin. Thank you for pointing this out. I think that, in my understanding, can be initially two approaches to that. One is the technical one, and it's essentially, of course, these platforms are mainly biased because the data sets for training the models are from data that is available mainly from this area. No, it's like a circle. It's a circle of things. If PlanNet, that we have been working with them for a while, mainly their data sets for training the identification of plant are because the open data is available from the European regions, and they will know, and then it's a circle of bias. Then what do we need to do? Work on the availability of data coming from South America, coming from the Global South in general. This is an endeavor that I think with the implementation of the CBD, the Conventional Biodiversity framework, are working on to mobilize, not because in South America there is not a lot of data. There is a lot of biodiversity data. At some point in my life, I was working with the biodiversity system in Colombia. The problem is we have a lot of technical constraints in terms of publication, but one of them, and this is connected to my second point, is concerns about the exploitation of the data. And this is a real concern from South America. The problem is researchers, practitioners said, okay, we will make open this biodiversity data, then people can train, it's a circle. Then PlanNet will have better data to train the models, then I will have a better identification, great. Then I will use the services of PlanNet and will be better, more accurate. But in fact, in this chain, there is a problem. And this is a small benefit for the community, but also this data that is open is used for researchers from the global north to produce a lot of papers that from the global south they cannot. Then the benefit, recognition, and status that they are gaining is gaining there. And researchers in the global south, we know we don't have the capability to pay subscriptions in journals, mainstream journals. Then there are a lot of concerns. This is one of them. But the second one is communities, concerned about patents, concerns about use of the data for even cases where it's like a flashback, no? Like even affecting them over the decision of the access. Then all of our concerns relating to the accessibility. That's why I said this first question about the AI is going even deeper when we see. But the other part of the answer that I like is how to help that this AI, and at the end the algorithms behind the AI that are designed and what data is validate, which observation, what is the name of this plant, and if, for instance, a new identification for a plant is coming and the AI have the power nowadays to see this is true or not, how to ensure that this can be really observed and curated by human is we need to create instances of governance, human instances that validate these algorithms. And that's our challenges for the citizen observatories itself. Create instances with these algorithms, and these that nowadays are black boxes for us need to have a supervision by human instances. It's one of the part of the solution for preventing these kind of things.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you for that answer. AI scares me, in terms of this homogenization, the terms. It's always the same. It goes for the mean, and it does have some issues. I think that was my last question. Final comment for the Global South people. How do you feel? How do you see working the SEXTANT model in a Global South environment where, authorities, or the relationship with authorities or with scientific authorities as well, is very different from Europe? Do you see any that it would work, that it could be? Does it need an adaptation?
Oh yeah, I really would love.
Another postdoc, Jauma.
For now is my 15 in the list. No, but I think that there is a potential that I would like to connect. And Mayo mentioned this before about with the care principles. And it's, for instance, nowadays we are in our research group is a collaboration with the data infrastructure for the Amazon Water Alliance. And this has an important component of indigenous knowledge behind this infrastructure. And then how the SEXTANT model can help to navigate governance and understanding the governance and infrastructure that need to recognize and balance indigenous knowledge and established science will be amazing. Another thing that we are approaching step to step nowadays to that, to see if the SEXTANT model really need to be expanded, or maybe at the end the action arenas modify completely to approach to this point of view. And I think that, at least from the South America perspective, is not because all of us is indigenous knowledge, but can be an interesting case study to consider it.
Thank you so much for your answers. Thank you for your presentation again. Do you have any other questions? Then I guess we open the floor to anyone with a PhD or above for any questions they might have.
Can I?
See behind it. Supervisors. If no one from the floor has questions, supervisor comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will be brief. A lot have been said. Thank you for your questions and comments. That I think that they have been really interesting, related with your work. Just two ideas. You were speaking about the timely of this work, and in all open science policies and forums, they are speaking about citizen science. After open access, research data, research assessment, the new topic is citizen science. So there will be a lot of new platforms, and there is a need of understanding, a need of having good practices, and I think that this work will help. You wanted to be helpful. This is something important from your work, Karen, and I think that you have achieved it. It will be useful for somebody else. And the other idea is that you didn't need a PhD. You needed to understand. You needed a deep understanding of everything. So it was important when you were choosing different methodologies, different schools of thoughts, because you wanted not just a big pictures, but a deep down perspective and approach of everything. And this is something that your work that we can see from your work. So it has been a pleasure to work with you, and thank you and congratulations.
Okay, I will try to be brief, but you know that sometimes I'm not so brief. No, I would like first to compare your work in the concept, not only your work, in general, citizen science, participatory sciences, and participatory platforms with remote sensing. I always say that there is a kind of analogy on that when at the beginning, I would say late 60s, 70s, in the past century, when some people say, hey, why not take pictures far away from the land, the earth, and we can take a very global picture? And many people say, oh, come on, there is no way to get useful or meaningful data so far away. You don't have any control of the atmosphere and so on. And there were many skeptics on that. And I think that, well, years after, and particularly because there was a kind of background theory behind explaining all this process, now many people accept that Earth observation, Earth programs are something very common. There are several agencies, NASA, the European Space Agency, with a lot of funding, structural funding, and these were very well accepted. You know that now part of the Earth program, now it's cut off because they are producing some knowledge that for some politics, they don't like it. No? And I'm thinking now in the same way with citizen science. When we started with citizen science, the same happened. Many skeptical people, come on, you don't have the control of people. People are providing data, uncontrolled. There is no way to extract meaningful data on that. But if we start having this kind of background theories, the theoretical background, and I think that your main contribution or your thesis is you are starting providing such a kind of pillars, and at least part of this theoretical background it's covered. So I think your main contribution is this. You will be one of the pioneers, and I hope that someday when people are talking about theoretical cities and science or participatory science, they would say, Soacha-Godoy started doing the SEXTANT model and so on. And I believe that this can happen. No? But let's imagine that now in the future we will have, hopefully, the European Participatory Science Agency. Do you think it's imaginable? Because I think for me there is one point. We need this kind of theoretical background, but we are empowering people and we are providing a lot of power to the people. So do you think it is feasible? I think from the technical point of view it's feasible, but from the political point of view it's dangerous. And this is something that we have discussed many times, and I would like to know your opinion on that. Do you think we could, because this is very bottom-up approach, is it feasible to think about one in the future to have the European Participatory Science Agency working and with structural funding? Easy question.
You see, until the last day and last minute, he was killing me. No, Jaume, thank you so much, Alex, for your comment. It was really a pleasure to navigate with you, and Alex has this perspective from open science that was very valuable for me, and always like a taking out side, because obviously with Jaume we work together and with the team, and Alex was also this point outside trying to see the things from another perspective, and with Jaume, of course, a lot of our ideas, not on mine, our ideas are the result of years of conversation and work and daily debate, including this one, no, including sometimes dreams. Do you think that a European Participatory Science Agency could exist? And then this debate of maybe yes or not. I will say that is needed, Jaume. And in some cases, the role that, that many of the initiatives are playing nowadays, especially with the role of advocacy, of the necessity to have, I would not call mirror data, but data contrast. Because, of course, governments are concentrating in some countries, and especially when we have the wave of the right wing, and this cannot be divided for politically positions, concentrating what is the data showing, what is the reality that the data is showing us. And then society needs to have a back. Society needs to have another reality from their own data, on their own terms. And this is part of many initiatives are doing on a local scale. No, they are air quality communities in Colombia and in other places here in Europe, creating their own air network of sensors, creating their own platforms and trying to show realities that sometimes governments, for many reasons, let's not say intentionally, for many reasons, structurally, economically, are not showing. And at the end, they are starting to play this role informally, doing advocacy, showing another reality, filling gaps, and mobilizing actions. That this could be maybe in a more structured way as an agency, and this can be funded structurally, I think is where my hope is not that high. I have to say that is quite difficult. And at the same time, I think that is the necessity for communities to work in an alternative ways and in an independent way. When we thought about structural, most of the time we think government, and it's difficult to imagine that agency funded for the government at the end of the day having this independent view. Then we need to keep being collaborative, innovative, and finding alternative ways to have a different perspective from participatory science about the reality and about the challenges, I think.
Thank you so much. Big clap, and we'll go deliberate. Is that okay? Thank you, Karen, very much for your presentation.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much. Espera, ya va. ¿Ah, sí? ¿En serio? ¿Ah, sí? Ay, yo sentí que duró, yo en algún punto dije, Karen, te estás enrollando. Para, Karen. Llegaba con poca esfuerzo.
Vale, aquí que vostè faci pantalla entera. Sí, crec que sí. Si fas pantalla entera, l'obres aquí a pantalla completa i ja anem a provar un moment. Sí, no sé, provar l'àudio directament. S'està veient tot, eh? Vale, pues digue-li. L'altre és dir-li extend. L'àudio ja està? Sí. Ah, això no. Totalment silenciat. Però dir-li que no sé què. Vale. No, només no està sonant. Vale, no està sonant el marc, però no està sonant els externs. Ho heu de programar? Sí. Vale, pues diga, era per provar-ho sense que us veiés. Ara ja està. Com demanar-li tot, perquè ja està. Duplicar i perquè ara està duplicada, que és el que volies, no? Sí, no, volia fer ampliada. Vale. Llavors aquí pots provar que vinguis. Si no veure el vídeo aquí, quan ho tinguis, i es començarà a reproduir. Si no, hasta aquí. Vale, l'obro i cap allà. Sí, era per provar. Tu vols provar l'àudio, no? Si vols qualsevol. Obre un YouTube. És que està connectat. Llavors, YouTube és més fàcil. Obres aquí, saps cap allà. Sí. Si vols el si no, això, fas com duplicada, ho obres aquí i fas a pantalla completa. Crec que m'obre amb el VLC. Vale. Ja tens el... Igual és més fàcil tenir-ho, estic pensant, igual és més a compte tenir-ho com duplicat. Saltan allá y allá dirían. Ya había tenido matriz aquí, aquí obras, no con diversas pantallas que se grabado a vídeo, y ya está. Aquí allá lo que no es conectarlo, si lo después lo hago. No, yo no, pero de que alguna.
So good. Okay, in English, thank you all for coming and thank you for waiting after deliberations. Thank you, Karen, for your presentation. We were commenting on how much we enjoyed the actual presentation and the debate. We will keep on talking about this later on because we still have a lot to talk about, and I think that's a sign of a work well done when people leave out the door with more questions than what they came in with. So we all agreed that your thesis was very, very interesting, very novelty, very timely. We mentioned this, and the final grade that we want to give you is an excellent. So congratulations to you, to both your supervisors, and go sleep and celebrate. Felicitaciones. Sí. Yes, that was the next part. You will be receiving from the university in the following week the actual dictamen, the words that we wrote, and the cum laude or not statement, decision. And also there's an award prize, right? An award for the university. Also, you will get that notification or not during the week. So we'll get all this documentation formally sent to you during the week. That's good.